Imagine a world where the skies aren't dominated by the F-35 or the B-21 Raider. Imagine aircraft capable of crossing the Atlantic at 3 times the speed of sound, nuclear-powered bombers that never needed to land, or fighter jets so advanced they seemed straight out of a 1950s science fiction film. These aren't fantasies. They were there, on drawing boards in wind tunnels and even on runways ready for their maiden flights. However, a phone call, a budget change, or a last-minute signature at the Pentagon condemned them to oblivion. The Bell D-188AI imagined an aircraft capable of taking off from a barrack's backyard or a ship's deck without moving an inch forward. This was Bell Aircraft's audacious proposal. Under the demands of the Air Force and Navy, the D-188A was born. It wasn't just an aircraft. It was a project of almost reckless ambition, designed to be both a defensive interceptor and an all-weather supersonic fighter bomber. This behemoth had to perform every imaginable task for 2 different services. But what truly made it seem like something out of a science fiction comic was its power plant. It didn't have 1 or 2. It had 8 turbojet engines. Even more incredible, 2 of those engines were mounted at the wingtips and could pivot, directing their thrust downwards to lift the aircraft vertically into the sky. We're talking about an engineering marvel that promised to reach Mach 2. An interceptor that would forever eliminate the vulnerability of bombable runways. If the enemy destroyed the airfields, the D-188A would simply take off from the brush. But in engineering, sometimes more is synonymous with disaster. That very technical complexity ultimately became its downfall. Trying to synchronize 8 engines with 1950s technology was a true logistical nightmare. A single power error and the aircraft would become a death trap. In the end, the wind shifted. The military's interest turned toward ballistic missiles and conventional aircraft that were far cheaper and easier to maintain. Bell's dream of vertical takeoff remained grounded, reminding us that sometimes being too far ahead of your time is just as dangerous as being left behind. The Lockheed YF-12, everyone knows the SR-71 Blackbird, the ghost of the skies. But few know it had a twin brother designed not to observe, but to hunt. Let me introduce you to the Lockheed YF-12, a prototype born in the shadows of Area 51, derived from the CIA's secret aircraft, the A-12. But while the Blackbird was dedicated to silent espionage, the YF-12 was a declaration of war, a pure interceptor, armed to the teeth with air-to-air missiles to stop any Soviet bomber before it touched American soil. Only 3 were built. 3 machines that instantly became the fastest and deadliest interceptors in the history of humankind. They were quite literally untouchable, capable of patrolling at over 80,000 feet, seeing the world from the edge of space, ready to fire at 3 times the speed of sound. So why did such a perfect aircraft never enter service? The short answer: money and strategy. The then Secretary of Defense ordered massive budget cuts, and the YF-12 was too expensive a jewel to maintain. But there was another, more ironic reason. It said the program was abandoned because the Soviet Union simply didn't have anything as fast. The United States realized it was spending a fortune hunting bombers that, compared to the YF-12, seemed to crawl along. The investment no longer made sense. The program was canceled, but the YF-12 refused to die in a hangar. For years, these 3 prototypes continued to fly with the USAF and NASA, delivering invaluable data on high-temperature and supersonic flight. It wasn't a failure. It was a machine that arrived in a future for which its own enemy wasn't yet ready. Lockheed AH-56 Cheyenne. In the skies of Vietnam, transport helicopters were being decimated. The lack of a fast and powerful escort was a gaping wound for the United States Army. In that chaos, a radical idea was born: the Lockheed AH-56 Cheyenne. Don't mistake it for a conventional helicopter. The Cheyenne was an absolute hybrid, a cross between a hunter and a mechanical dragonfly. What made it unique was its tail. In addition to the traditional rotor, it had a pusher propeller that propelled it forward like an airplane, allowing it to reach 400 kilometers per hour, a speed that left any other helicopter of the time in the dust and made it a ghostly apparition on the battlefield. It was a beast designed for everything: combat escort, long-range penetration, and anti-tank missions. It didn't matter if it was day, night, or if the weather was hell. The Cheyenne had the technology to dominate it all. It was destined to be king of the jungle. But fate had other plans. Being so advanced comes at a price. The project began to sink into a quagmire of technical delays and stability problems. But the final blow was tragic. A fatal accident during main rotor testing sealed its fate. In 1972, the Army made a difficult decision. They canceled the Cheyenne contract, opting instead for a less experimental, simpler, and more robust design. A decision that years later would give rise to another legend we all know today, the AH-64 Apache. The Cheyenne died so that the Apache could reign, leaving behind the image of a future that could have been, but which was too complex for its time. Boeing 2707. There was a time when the sky was limitless. In the late 1960s, Europe already had its jewel, the Concorde. But the United States wasn't going to be left behind. They didn't just want to compete, they wanted to dominate. Thus, the Boeing 2707 was born. It wasn't just an airplane. It was the technological pride of an entire nation. Boeing won the government competition with a proposal that seemed impossible. While the Concorde was slender and small, Boeing's giant was going to be colossal, bigger, much faster, and capable of carrying 250 passengers at 3 times the speed of sound. But its most fascinating feature was its variable geometry wings. Wings that extended for takeoff and retracted to slice through the wind like a steel arrow at Mach 3. With billions in federal subsidies and orders from airlines around the world, success seemed inevitable. The future of human transportation was here. But the American dream of flying faster than sound began to collide with an unexpected reality. The deafening roar of the supersonic boom as it broke the sound barrier over cities became a public enemy. This was compounded by a growing fear. Environmental concerns about the damage these engines could cause to the ozone layer. Public opinion shifted, and with it, policy. In 1971, the blow was decisive. The United States Congress abruptly cut funding. The giant was mortally wounded. Boeing was left with a half-built prototype in the hangar, and the bitter task of laying off 7,000 workers. The Boeing 2707 never saw the skies. It was the end of an era of blind optimism, leaving the Concorde as the undisputed king of the supersonic skies. McDonnell Douglas A-12 Avenger III in the late 1980s. In the darkest corridors of the Pentagon, a Phantom was being conceived. An aircraft unlike anything seen before. A perfect triangle designed to be the invisible predator of the oceans. Its mission was clear and brutal: to replace the veteran A-6 Intruder and become the first stealth bomber capable of operating from the deck of an aircraft carrier. It had to be a ghost on radar, yet a machine strong enough to withstand the punishment of a landing in the open sea. The project was born under absolute secrecy, but soon, the shadows began to devour the budget. The design became an engineering trap. To be strong and land on aircraft carriers, it needed weight. But to be invisible and efficient, it needed lightness. Both requirements clashed head-on, and the sea is the worst enemy of stealth. The salt air, the scorching sun, and the rough landings not only punished the airframe, but also destroyed the delicate special coating that made it invisible to radar. The Avenger was losing its superpower before it was even born. Mismanagement, endless delays, and massive cost overruns in the billions. In 1991, the Pentagon lost patience and pressed the panic button. The program was abruptly canceled, unleashing one of the biggest legal battles in U.S. military history. It wasn't an enemy missile that brought it down. It was death by bureaucracy. The A-12 Avenger II, the flying Dorito that promised to revolutionize naval warfare, ended its days as an expensive pile of blueprints and a historical cautionary tale that not even the most invisible aircraft can hide from administrative disaster. The North American XF-108 Rapier was, in every sense of the word, a massive weapon system. It was the late 1950s. The Cold War was at its peak. The United States needed a guardian, a definitive long-range interceptor with a dual purpose: to be the protective shadow of the XB-70 Valkyrie bomber in enemy skies, and to become the impenetrable wall against the new Soviet supersonic bombers. The Rapier was an engineering marvel designed to shatter any existing record. At its heart beat 2 General Electric J93 engines, the same ones that powered the giant Valkyrie. Its objective? to maintain a terrifying cruising speed 2,000 miles per hour. But speed wasn't everything. It needed endurance. With a combat radius of 1,100 nautical miles without refueling, this predator could patrol the frigid and vast Arctic for hours, waiting for a signal. And when the signal arrived, its key component came into play, the Hughes and ASG-18 system, the first pulse Doppler radar in the United States, a revolutionary technology capable of looking down and distinguishing the enemy from the noise of the ground at massive distances. Before the pilot even made visual contact, the Rapier would have unleashed its fury. 3 GR-9 Falcon missiles, lethal projectiles with a range of 100 miles designed to wipe any bomber off the map before it even knew it was being hunted. Despite this absolute power, the Rapier never took off. In September 1959, a perfect storm sealed its fate. Intelligence revealed that the Soviet Union was no longer betting on aircraft, but on intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. Suddenly, spending billions to intercept bombers that would never arrive lost all strategic sense. The Pentagon, under budgetary pressure, couldn't justify maintaining 2 Mach 3 behemoths simultaneously. The project died when only a full-scale mock-up existed, however. The Rapier left a phantom legacy. Its radar and missiles weren't wasted. They were inherited by the legendary Lockheed YF-12, and its aerodynamic DNA lives on, hidden in the designs that dominated the skies in the following decades.